So the Event Manager blog earlier this year released some statistics saying that about 25% of us event professionals have made a successful transition to virtual. It's like a super low number, and I was very curious to see who exactly these people were. So I reached out to somebody named Chloe Mandell. Based in Portland, Oregon, her company Mandell Experiences can confidently say that they are virtual event experts. Chloe has over 10 years of experience, and among many other things, she can include the 2016 Rio Olympics, as well as the American X Games on her resume. Chloe is extremely thoughtful. She provides very intelligent and very clear answers. So make sure that you grab a pen, take some really good notes, because you're about to learn a lot from her. This is Jason Greenman. You're listening to Breakouts, where I invite the top event professionals from around the world to come and share their stories and their experiences with us. So without further ado, here's Chloe. Good morning, Chloe. Thank you for joining us today, so early in the morning on the West Coast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Of course. So I've brought you on today to discuss something many of us, not just in events, are adjusting to, but most people around the world, and that's the idea of moving to digital. And I know that you've done this quite successfully yourself with your own events business. And so really to get things started, to kick it off, maybe you could just give us a short overview of your business so listeners have an idea, have a bit of context as to your background.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, USA, and my company is Mandell Experiences. We offer an integrated approach to events. So our kind of little tagline is plan it, fund it, promote it, run it. So you do need right butts and seats. So you gotta market what you put together, as well as we do have a really comprehensive network of sponsors that can help kind of augment some revenue streams, and then making sure that the delivery is just exceptional for all stakeholders.
Very cool. And I know that you have a passion for philosophy, so let's get in there, because this is actually tied into what we're going to talk about today. And part of this change and this adaptation, it has to do directly with the whole industry of events. And I think a lot of people have a different idea of how to define events. And the last time we spoke, I really appreciated your insights on that kind of, I know it's a big topic, but how would you define events from more of like a macro point of view?
Yeah, it's so fun to kind of think in this way. Never would I thought to be asking myself, what is an event? But the more you look at the virtual or digital capabilities, I always kind of encourage my clients to think kind of going down two different roads. Do you want a show, kind of just like a TV show where, there's one-way communication, it's output towards you? Or do you want that two-way communication? And that to me is really what an event is. There's that engagement piece where the audience actually is influencing the content. Maybe it's something as simple as through YouTube. There's all sorts of apps out there now where you can pull a question that was from the chat onto the screen that's impacting the content that others are seeing. Maybe it's something where on a panel you leave a blank seat for an audience member to sit in. And that's a kind of fun way to really, really bring someone into the fold. But there's lots of ways where you can make people feel involved. And when you have that co-creation, there's more buy-in, and it just creates a really dynamic, unique experience. And that's the other thing about live events is you're not sure what's going to happen. And that is another kind of plus and why people would tune into something live versus on demand. We're also seeing that difference. So I wanted to kind of just throw that other element in. But really, if you were to distill it, an event involves that two-way communication.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of defining it. And because I think as event planners, we have this going digital, put your content in competition with content that exists on YouTube, on the hundreds of blogs and platforms that are out there where there might be a similar type of content that somebody's been writing about or has recorded about in the past. And I think it's really insightful that the main difference there is the ability to interact and actually influence what happens during the event. You can't do that to something that's been pre-recorded.
Yep.
And I mean, the word in events for the last 6 months is a word I think some of us have come to disdain a little bit, and that's the big P word, the pivot. And I think that you had an idea that you prefer to use the word evolve rather than pivot. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit more? Why it's more of an evolution rather than a pure pivot?
Yeah, certainly. I think, right now it's a great time to try things. And so, not to get too into semantics, but if we think of pivoting, it means that, we're no longer doing the previous aspects. So live events may come, will hopefully come back soon. Obviously in a safe manner. They're actually they are happening now in a safe way. A lot of venues are accommodating. So there is that evolution, right? You're just kind of adding it into your toolbox, the ability to produce virtually. And I do kind of really like thinking that even our own businesses are dynamic and can evolve, right? And but no matter how you look at it, just having that open mind and willingness to think outside the box, both in you as a business person, what can you offer, as well as maybe you as the client, and how can you serve your member base, or serve your brand in thinking this way. So evolution is a little bit more approachable to me as well. There's maybe a slight stigma against pivot, like, oh, before it was bad, which is just not at all the case. We're just responding to the environment.
Totally. Yeah, I have the same sort of idea that generally in business, if you're pivoting, it's because your original idea didn't work, right? And I mean, we're still producing events at the end of the day. It's not that we have to stop producing events and pivot to some totally new service line. We're still looking for engagement and interaction, educating the attendees. It's just that the platform may have changed a bit. So yeah, I totally agree with the evolution. I think we should create a movement. Yeah,
I'm not the only one. I've heard it a couple of times now, and I completely agree as well.
Yeah. And now you've been around and worked with sporting events. So kind of sticking on this idea of evolution, because I think in the events world, a lot of people are approaching this as something that's completely new, that we've never experienced before. This whole idea of a virtual event or a hybrid event, as if it's some brand new thing that's come onto the scene. But I think you, having worked in sports before, have made a very good point about this too, which is they've been producing live events alongside kind of a virtual production of the same event, or a digital production of that. Can you explain that a little bit more in depth for the listeners?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I served as a lead coordinator at X Games. I was a hospitality manager at the Rio Olympics. And so that's just, and I was freelancing at that point, but it really is remarkable to see the level of production that goes into both experiences. So sports have been doing this ever since there was TV, right? And it's, it's why ESPN is a brand. And I think it's really interesting to think of those two events essentially overlapping, where even the sporting events that I produced, I produce a lot of large scale rock climbing competitions of all things, which is really fun. So we have, 100,000 live stream viewers tuning in live to watch one of the larger climbing competitions in the country, if not the world. And it's really important to know when are the commercial breaks, so that those two overlapping run of shows, if you will, are in sync, and you're creating fun entertainment, maybe, just as you see if you've been to any major, league sporting event. Those commercial breaks are good times to engage the audience, as well as then give commercial and sponsor time for your big brands. But another thing that is important to think about is just that, level of communication then that's needed too. So even though there's two productions, it's really important that there's a bit of glue in between those two. And so maybe how that would translate right to virtual is if you are working in a studio where there's any sort of on-site experience, if you're working especially in hybrid, this has become more and more important. Just thinking about those two separate audiences as almost two separate events will help you really do do justice to both audiences and make sure that their experience is equal but different, right?
Right. And so when you approach kind of a virtual event, or I guess what we expect to come back, which is more of a hybrid model where you have the live event alongside a virtual event, you would really approach that as maybe two separate strategies, kind of two models on top of each other running in parallel. Is that right?
Absolutely. So it can go, depending on your budget or just, your resources, even having two separate teams can be helpful. The way that a virtual audience engages with an event is different than on-site. We've already seen this, that content has to be a little bit shorter because not everyone can, tune in for, say, an 8-hour conference.
Right.
So you got to chop it up a bit. Other things that are different is just that networking piece. So really thinking strategically around the technological tools, and also whether it's important for your virtual audience to engage with one another and the on-site audience, or maybe they're kind of in their bubble and in addition, on-site may or may not know that a virtual audience is there. I think there's some really great event apps that involve, especially for conferences, some engagement, especially with speaker Q&A, where anyone from anywhere can join. The key there is live and making sure that your technology is up to snuff, so to speak, that the Wi-Fi is creating a live experience in sync for anyone around the world.
Okay. The networking is an interesting one, because I've seen a lot of people struggle with the how should I put that? It's not as difficult in some ways to put the content online or to make the content digital, but getting the level of engagement and networking that you would have at a live event, that sort of networking in a virtual space seems to be a bit more of a challenge. People are struggling with how to do that. What has worked for you? Is there any, do you have any tips or advice for people that are trying to get more, I guess, greater networking outcomes from their virtual events?
Sure. First off, I would definitely think of, right now we are in the age of mindset. So all these challenges that we're confronting, if you can view those as opportunities. And so this is where it's really interesting to look at the technology that's out there and maybe explore ways that you haven't even leveraged, previously on site, such things as AI matchmaking. If people build out their profiles and then the technology can be like, hey, you should talk to Susan, you guys would really get along. That's really exciting, actually. So I personally think this is a wonderful time to just kind of really see what's out there, experiment. People have a really high tolerance for change at the moment,
totally,
as we well know. And so if you're ever going to try something that's brand new and, you might feel like you don't know what you're doing, now is actually the best time to do that. And when it comes to really answering your question around engagement, I think just making sure that that kind of every aspect of your event has some component that involves the audience. Again, you're trying not to just talk at them. Even something as simple as having the speaker, take a minute, play some music for a minute and ask people to write in the chat an answer to a question, or maybe bringing them on screen if you have that capability. So various elements like that can just make the audience feel heard, feel that they know, even though, especially it's hard with Zoom, sometimes we can't even see one another. And so how do you create that feeling? And I was really fortunate in the last virtual event I did, we had someone, an attendee actually email us that she said when she logged out of the platform that day, that she had the same feeling of sadness as when she leaves an on-site event. And that to me was just outstanding. It means we did our job well, and we created that sense of community, of belonging that I think everyone seeks out events for in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially the goal. If you can get somebody to feel that way when they're logging out of their computer, that's, I would say that you've accomplished a very significant milestone with that attending.
Yeah.
And I mean, we kind of have been talking about this move to virtual, and I think we've both experienced it. There's two types of people. It seems like there's kind of this camp that that has seen it. They got the Zoom burnout very quickly, and have kind of said, screw virtual. Live is always going to be better, so I'm just going to wait until live events comes back. Versus the people who are kind of curious and willing to experiment and are just kind of accepting that this is a part and will always be a part of future events. I mean, why is there a difference, and how can we, I guess, encourage people to give virtual a fair chance?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about those people, I think, specifying that it's the event organizers that I see, kind of those two camps of organizers, maybe the clients too. So if you're an organization that usually throws events, some people have embraced them, some people haven't. And I can't really speak to why someone would think one way or the other. I do know that, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we have a certain degree of familiarity, I should say, with risk and fear. Mm-hmm. And so just playing around with that, we are now, our brains are kind of wired to keep us safe. So that's why anytime we're pushed outside of our comfort zone, it's your brain telling you like you're about to die. So that's, on the biological level. More importantly, right. I think what the takeaway should be is that, that's totally natural to feel that fear. And I'm a rock climber myself. So, you can find all sorts of sports analogies for maybe sports that you do as well.
Sure.
But really kind of then taking, again, seeing that mindset, taking those obstacles as opportunities. And I find experimentation, exploration to be really fun. It's like I kind of view virtual events a little bit like the movie Inception. Like gone are these common notions of even time and space. Right. So your venue is now, say, a virtual event platform. If you have that, if not, maybe it's Zoom, but space no longer exists in the same way as we had it before, where we're all in one physical, building at one time. We're tuning in from potentially all over the world. And then with time, we all of a sudden are interacting. We talked about live engagement, but there's, so much studies around post-event engagement. So a lot of these platforms will provide, recorded on-demand content, and we're seeing a lot of rewatches. And so your content kind of lives on, and making sure that's integrated into your strategy is really important. So to get back to your original topic around kind of the two camps, I think it takes kind of that level of, if you're so used to set in your ways and so used to one thing, that's fine. I'm not here to convince you to go virtual. Sure. What I can just explain from my own experience is that it is neat to see the potential, and then even use this as a wonderful opportunity to learn. So then we can integrate tech back into our on-site experiences once those are possible, to actually augment those through technology. So that's where my head is at right now. I'm constantly thinking, sure, for the virtual event I'm producing, but also trying to think even, 3 steps ahead of like, great, how could this make an on-site experience, an attendee really connect, maybe even on-site with an attendee they may not have met, again, through, say, that AI matchmaking. That'd be so cool if you had that, on-site in an event and be like, oh, Tony over there is actually really into cooking, and so are you. Right. Like, go meet up, It's just really cool, the potential. And I can't emphasize enough that time and space can really be played with, and we're creating mini worlds for people. So that's exciting for me.
100%. It's you're creating something that will exist, in forever and in eternity. It's the days of you have a live event and that was fun and you're scribbling notes because this is the only moment you'll be ever able to see it. I think there still are some events that are run that way, but I totally agree. I mean, if you're able to record and put that into your long-term strategy and cut that up into content throughout the year for your client or for your own business, there's so much opportunity to use the digital product that comes after the event. And there is a lot of opportunity. And I think what you said about the experimentation is totally on point too. It's, I remember obviously the live events, any little thing that went wrong, which as event planners, we know they tend to do that every once in a while.
Murphy's Law, right?
Murphy's Law.
If it can't go wrong, it will go wrong.
Exactly. You're sweating because, everybody expects perfection, right? It's, if the lights in the hotel go out for 30 seconds, it's not perfect because we've been doing the live events for so long. So the expectations are so high. And I think the expectations are becoming higher for virtual, but as a virtual event producer, you can kind of play with people understand that this is new and people understand that you're experimenting. And I mean, it's a valuable place to come from because you can try new things. And if there's a small problem, people are extremely understanding. I've seen so many events where, there's a technical glitch, everybody jumps onto Twitter and everybody ends up just kind of laughing about it. And there's this camaraderie around the technical glitch, which, you may not have the same response in a physical world. So I totally agree.
I do want to add, if I may, just something to bear in mind around psychology to wrap that. Talk about philosophy, we talk about psychology.
Bring it on. Yeah.
It is really important, and I was trying to look up the term real quick, but I know this is wrong, but something around the law of relevancy or something to that effect. It is very important to remember that people's own memories, the way that it works, they're going to remember the very beginning. And they're going to remember the very end. So as long as you can make those, you're setting the tone with whatever the start of your event is. And then absolutely, it's that feeling you leave them with. And what happens in between, yes, it matters, of course. You want it to do your best job. But I would encourage people to kind of let themselves off the hook, if you will. Right. And remember that kind of psychological reality that that how people perceive your event is going to be based off those two things.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah, if you're going to nail anything, nail the beginning and the end, right?
Yep, totally. Yeah.
Now, as someone who's evolved successfully, what have been your best resources for learning? Because I know when the lockdown came in, it wasn't regional. It's the first time where this has just been, for example, you're in Portland, Oregon, I'm in Barcelona, and we are going through the exact same experience. It's super unique. It's crazy. I know everybody jumped on to level up, to level up their skills and their education on this. What have been some of your best resources or sources, or how did you go about upping your skills in the virtual world?
Sure. Yeah. I just want to kind of make a plug. I do want to acknowledge that there has been inequality in the way that the coronavirus has affected people of different socioeconomic states as well as race. And so that's important to acknowledge. But when it comes to kind of this overall, state of change, certainly we've had to go through that. I would highly recommend the site Event Manager blog, so EMB. And they have put on some remarkable events themselves. Right at the beginning, they put on an event around pivot to virtual. Then they saw the next kind of outcry of needs was how do we get engagement, just like you were asking, Jason. And then most recently, they put on a hybrid event. And so this is geared towards event producers, but anyone who's interested in this stuff can tune in. And they're about 3 or 4 hours long. So it is great to have access to that content afterwards because you're not expected to watch it all the way through unless you're super dedicated. But that has been remarkable to hear from experts in the field who maybe have gone through this before or have experimented successfully. In addition, BizBash is another great event industry resource. And lastly, I've just been really inspired by all the groups that are popping up, especially through Facebook. So Event Planners Gather, I believe it's it's hosted by BizBash, but Event Planners Gather is just such a wonderful resource because we're seeing a time now where everyone's really working together. And, I really just kind of grateful for the people that are willing to kind of be vulnerable, ask the tough questions like, has anyone tried this before? Or, hey, I'm looking for a, video vendor or just anything. And, just the whole community is there to support one another. And so those kind of three have been really special, but do kind of stay connected with the various virtual event platforms, because they're also working really hard to educate people on how to use not only just their specific platform, but just how to produce virtual events. It behooves them that the organizers understand that just the overarching best practices. And so I've seen some actually really neat kind of just quick little 1-hour webinars from various event platforms that have been actually quite good.
The EMB has been great, and I think they've actually got another one coming up, and it's looking like a really good lineup as well. So those are some really, really good recommendations, and I'll try to throw those into the show notes, which we'll put up afterwards as well. And I think what you said too about vulnerability is really important. I mean, the events industry, obviously, depending on who you're talking to, has been can feel somewhat kind of closed and secretive at times. And I've been very much inspired by people's willingness to say, I don't know how this works, right? Which is something that is really hard for people to do. And it's been inspiring to see people open up and say, I don't know how this works. Will someone explain it to me? And I think it's really powerful to see those groups form and people just trying to work together.
Totally. Yeah. If you have a relationship with a client, I think the question you can ask them is, or just kind of be really transparent and saying like, yep, this is my first virtual event, but do you trust me to be able to figure it out? Right. And that's really, I think, the relationships that, I'm really fortunate to have. And, I would encourage anyone listening to kind of think in that way of, you're a capable human and person. And yes, we're all in this together. But if you have that relationship of trust and of kind of consistency on your deliverables, you're going to deliver. Yes, it'll be new. Yes, you'll learn things. Yes, you'll make mistakes. Like, already accept that. I can speak to my first virtual event. It was a 2-day event, and probably every possible thing that could have gone wrong went wrong the first day, but the second day was great. So, you kind of have to jump in with 2 feet, know that this is all new for everyone. And we're doing a lot of A/B testing, as I like to say. So if something doesn't work, take note and you'll do better next time.
This has been Breakouts with me, your host, Jason Greenman. If you like what you've seen or heard, please subscribe, follow along, follow our channels. And if you have a minute, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.